Into it. Today we're going to be talking about conquering the self-sabotaging behavior. So we noticed in the song that there was a lot of self-sabotage in the names. It's my name is, right? So what do you call yourself, right? So what is it that you sabotage yourself with? What term is it that you can substitute there for yourself, right? But today we're actually going to focus on a more practical application of this concept. So, of course, we're talking about conquering self-sabotaging behavior, and the goal for tonight, or what you want to take for tonight, are going to be just essentially a few tactics. It's avoiding behavior that leads to stress-producing incidents. So, just once again, it's avoiding behavior that leads to stress-producing incidents, and that's straight from what she said, or from what the author said in the book. So how is it that we can reduce these stress-producing incidents? How can we reduce stress in general? I was laughing. Well, I wasn't laughing. It's not the right term. But I was a little bit curious how what is being covered in this topic is very similar to what was covered the very last time I was here. I know it was a while ago, but the last time I was up here talking about something was for the distraction topic back in December. And it's very similar because most of these things go back to the topic of distraction, because distraction is a major stress-producing problem in our life. So before we go into the word, just to give you a rundown of what we're going to do tonight, we're first going to talk about the author's notes. So that's just going straight down bullet point by bullet point on what the author mentioned. Then we're going to go into the key verse for this topic, which is also what the author selected. And finally, then we're going to go into additional material, which are notes that I can kind of add on from my experience, from what I've dealt with and stuff like that. I'm sure it's limited, but it's something that we can take from there at least. And then of course we'll go into the most important portion, which is the word. And then funnily enough, we're going to go back into the story that I last touched, focusing instead on the first two chapters. That's Nehemiah rebuilding the temple. So now let's get started first with that picture, Anthony, if you don't mind. So you guys might have seen this before. I'm just going to leave it up there so that way you guys can get how bad this picture actually is. But you have things you like to do, and then you have things that you're good at, right? And you have those things going together. Then you have things that make money. Then you notice that what you actually do goes right in between everything that you can possibly be productive at. So this is the type of thing that we often find ourselves doing. We take on projects, we do things, we say I'm going to lose 30 pounds in like 2 weeks, It's like, well, can you actually do that? So I'm going to leave it up there because I find myself falling in that very slim category quite a bit. So I just leave it up. And what's worse, by the way, is that you can see that the things I like to do, the things I'm good at, is totally separated from things that make money. So, in other words, you can't even apply what you're good at to make money. So, double whammy. But anyway, we'll go ahead and go straight into the author's notes. So, the first thing the author suggests, and just to let you know what this time around, when the author's talking about ways to reduce stress or ways to conquer self-sabotaging behavior, she approaches it in a more secular form. By secular, I mean more practical things that you can do in your life in order to reduce stress. Of course, we'll go into the word, but I want to mention these points first. So the first thing is reduce clutter in your life, right? So perfect example is, how's your room? If someone walked into your room right now, would you be a little embarrassed about it? Or nice, I got some eyes. But would you be embarrassed about it, or how would you react with someone being in your room, right? So it's important to reduce clutter in your life because that means you have less things to worry about. So, for instance, just recently, I was cleaning my car and I lost an earphone and I was stressing about it, But I wouldn't have to have stressed about that after I finished cleaning my car had I put my earphones away from the beginning, right? So I would have actually been able to enjoy having a clean car right off the bat. So that's a good example there. Prepare for the unexpected. Good example of this, savings. How much money do you actually have in your savings, and how well do you respect your savings? So if you have a certain amount of money, hey, it's growing in your savings, and then you're like, oh, you know what? I think I can spend this money on something. And you keep spending and spending and spending until it's, you're lost, you're down by $3,000 in 1 month, So savings is an example of prepare for the unexpected. You want to ensure that you have sufficient resources, per se, for that rainy day. But also, you want to ensure that you're preparing for events that might happen throughout the day. And with that, we can kind of bleed into anticipate realistically. So, for instance, do you account for traffic on your way to work, or do you arrive early to work? These are some of the things that personally I'm still working at, to be honest. I'm starting to use some tools. For instance, a tool that I started using recently to try to arrive to places early is Google Maps. Because Google Maps, you can set a depart by time, and then it'll let you know what time you have to depart by in order to ensure you arrive to a location on time. Anticipating realistically is also, Anthony can attest to this, and I'm sure all disciplines can really attest to this, is a very important skill, because what's the main reason you go to college? You go to college to learn how to predict something that's going to happen in the future. For instance, I don't just if I were civil, I don't just build a bridge, I design a bridge predicting that it's going to work. And for that, I need to account for as many things, anticipate realistically as many variables as I can. Being organized. So for that, we can be very general. Being organized, you have so many different tools to your disposal nowadays, at least. It's just a matter of picking one and sticking to it consistently. For instance, you have habit trackers. If you're trying to start a habit, all you do is simply just click on a counter to ensure that you can track how many times a day you've done it or whatever it is. It goes both ways. For addictions and habits, you can use the same tool. You also have physical or digital to-do lists. So if you work better physically or digitally, you can start a to-do list and ensure that whatever you're doing, you can check it off. And with that, I'll actually attest that having a to-do list is very important, because it'll make you feel more accomplished and give you that extra drive to do even more throughout the day. So a to-do list to organize your things, checklist to write down ideas, and also I highly recommend something I've started doing recently is whenever you get an idea or just something you have to do, write it on the spot. Don't wait for a few days, or don't wait I'll write it down in an hour when I get my break or whatever it is. Write it down on the spot, because then you'll forget, and then you'll add to the stress throughout the day. Then we have keep track of items in your life. This one's pretty simple. You have a lot of things going on in your life. The best way I've found to do it is to categorize portions of your life. So, for instance, how are you doing with your relationship with the Lord? Know that your relationship with the Lord is going to affect every other area of your life. That's just basic. We already know that. We've mentioned that a bunch of times, but you need to prioritize that. But you have different aspects of your life also. For instance, how are you doing with work? Do you feel that you are being productive at work, that you're maximizing the time, and that you're being a good employee? Or money, how are you doing with money? Do you have goals set aside for your money? Do you want to achieve 3,000 in 2 months, or whatever it might be? Whatever goals or whatever it is, you need to make sure you categorize that. All of these kind of go down to one single point, and that is you want to reduce uncertainty as much as possible. Again, you want to reduce uncertainty as much as possible, because uncertainty is the major stressor for everyone in their lives, right? I don't really know about horror movies or horror movies in general, but I'm pretty sure that horror movies are designed to maximize uncertainty. For instance, their shots are always, recluse. They're always very focused on one object and having a lot of darkness in the back, because they want to amplify the uncertainty, because naturally uncertainty stresses us. The same applies here. If you want to reduce the stress, you want to reduce the uncertainty in your life, make everything more predictable. And with that, we go into the last, I said the last before, but this is really the last one, is you want to keep track, or I already said that, you want to keep track of items in your life, listing down things. One thing, I want to go back to the first point and make a very quick side note. is you don't want to sign up for more than you can handle. That's something I've personally dealt with. This is a note I kind of added because I've personally put on too many things on my plate. Whatever it might be, I'm not going to give an example there, but if you put on too many things on your plate, you're obviously not going to be able to achieve whatever it is that you set your goals to be. You're going to fail in all of them, and what's going to end up happening is your overall motivation is going to reduce, and then you're not going to want to do anything. Then you're going to become recluse, and then that leads to a whole slew of things. So you want to make sure that you focus on one thing. Ron Swanson has a quote, but I'm not going to say it. But Ron Swanson has a quote, so research it. Another thing I want to note with that topic, with that point, is we have these great minds in our generation, or not our generation, but in previous generations. We have Stephen Hawkins, or actually, let's focus on Stephen Hawkins. So, you have Stephen Hawkins, Albert Einstein, Newton, Mozart, Wolfgang, so many brilliant minds, whatever it might be. But one thing that we should note about all of these guys is that, they weren't studying 3 languages or doing college full-time or juggling a part-time job while being involved in clubs or intramurals. No, they devoted their time full-heartedly to that one singular task, and they became great at it. They became, obviously they became great at it because we know their names now, right? But that's something that we need to kind of take on and apply to our lives. It's a little difficult because, being fresh out of college and being youth, we're kind of at that mentality of like, I want to explore everything. But at the same time, it's beneficial for us to kind of choose something and start focusing on it at an early age, because then that means that we have the more time to become professionals. There's a poster that is over at Cal State in the engineering department that I find really motivating, and it says it takes about 10,000 plus hours to become a professional at something. So apply that here. It's the same thing. The earlier you start, the more time you have to become a professional at something. When you become a professional at something or you become proficient at something, that helps your self-esteem. You become more self-confident. Of course, distinguishing the difference between self-confidence and pride. We got to make sure we don't fall in the pitfall of pride, which we kind of talked about in the last message. I know it was a while ago, but we kind of did. So the last thing, I drink a lot of water. Sorry. But the last thing is you want to reduce most of your daily activities to a routine. So you want to boil everything you do down to a routine. Now, the reason why a routine is beneficial is because it'll give you more time to plan something exciting or interesting in your life. It'll give you the ability to put some flavor or pizzazz in your life, if that makes sense. If you don't have a routine, you wake up and then you sit there in bed, maybe watching YouTube for an hour or so, thinking in the back of your head what you're going to do. What are you going to eat? You go downstairs, you prepare yourself something to eat, you spend another hour probably downstairs cooking it and just sitting there drinking your coffee, which isn't bad. It's not a bad way. But then what do you do after? Do you read the Word? Was that even in the plan, in that plan that you're kind of making up in the spot? And you're stressing yourself out to begin with because you're extemporaneously making this plan as you go along, So it's like, you don't have to do that. Just make a routine and stick by it. And I think one of the big things for me about not wanting to have a routine was that it makes life bland. But it doesn't really make life bland when you think about it, because by having a routine, you kind of have something to be proud about your identity. For instance, if you have, if you work out or whatever it is that you do in your routine, or you fix your bed, for an example, those things you can kind of say, okay, hey, I did this. You kind of have that motivation, that extra juice per se, to do more complicated tasks later in the day. That's it for secular. Now we're going to go into the key verse for today. Now the key verse is going to be Proverbs 27:12. And if you don't mind, Anthony, if you can pull NLT for today. So the verse reads, "The prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly and suffers the consequences." So I think the verse is very very, very self-explanatory. You have two sentences. The first sentence is saying that a prudent person, what's contrasting two ideas, right? So you have the first person, or the prudent person, is a person that's wise, that foresees. Not only does that person foresee the danger, but they take the precautions against the danger. So, seeing the danger comes from reading the Word of God, understanding the pitfalls that lie ahead in our journey as Christians, but also understanding the pitfalls in your job, understanding and being not wise, having the knowledge in a sense. But then, and takes a precaution. But then you see the simpleton, what it says for the simpleton is the simpleton goes blindly and suffers the consequences. So simpleton just kind of goes on along and suffers the consequences. One of the things that, a quote that this kind of reminded me of or inspired me about was, I'm pretty sure we've heard it time and time again, is insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So you want to avoid being that simpleton or having that if you want to call it that insanity, if you want to succeed. With that, we'll go ahead and go into the additional material, and then we'll go straight into the Word. So we're nearly done here. For the additional material, the first point I want to mention, and again, just want to reiterate, we're going into something else new here. So we just finished talking about author's notes. So everything we mentioned were author's notes, right? We mentioned the 6 points. The 6 points are: reduce clutter in your life, prepare for the unexpected, keep track of items in your life, be organized, anticipate realistically, and 6 is reduce most of your daily activities to a routine. We also discussed the key verse. The key verse is Proverbs 27:12. It's something I want just to keep in your mind. It's the motivating factor for this. That's what you don't want to be. You want to be the prudent person. But now we're going to go into the additional material, which is kind of the points that I added on top of what she had mentioned or what she had discussed. So the first point is be organized, methodical, and cautious. Foresight is a critical skill built by listening to mentors and experience. That all boils down to plan ahead. So the first point is plan ahead. You want to make sure that you plan ahead, whatever it is that you're going to do. Planning ahead touches a few things that we've already mentioned. You have anticipating realistically. You also have making sure that you're writing things down and stuff like writing things down. And organizing yourself. One of the big, for me, for point one of the big things that really reminds me of this is my father. So my father is very meticulous, very organized, and he designs a plan from the start to ensure that we have the most fun as possible whenever we're on an excursion or a field trip or whatever it is. But the same thing goes for so many other things as well. He's just very meticulous, and he plans out every little detail to ensure and to maximize whatever it is that the diversion or whatever it is. So that's point one. You want to make sure you plan ahead. Point two is be flexible and adaptable. This is, so to speak, it's being nonchalant. So it's being able to react adequately when your plans fail. And in other words, being ready for change in your plan. So a very great example of this, I think personally, is any professional licensing exams. So I think of course they're very difficult to pass, right? But I think one of the things that we kind of get into the mindset of is, I failed, I'm not good enough. But sometimes the Lord closes doors for a moment, or he closes them for a lifetime, and it's for your good. We'll go more into that and what that means, but what you want to take out from this is you want to be ready for change in your plan. That's the critical thing. And with that, what we're really discussing is you want to be ready for failure. Be ready for failure. I'm pretty sure we've heard it. It's cliche, but failure is the keystone to success or something along those lines. You've heard it. It's cliche, but it's true. Point three, this is a very important one too. Have a reason to plan. Acknowledge your spiritual and secular goals, aspirations, and ideas. Ensure your goals align with God's desire for your life. The way you want to do this is, you want to write them down. This kind of goes back to what we said earlier. If you get any ideas, any goals, or anything at all, you want to make sure that you write them down in a list. So that way you can kind of track it, and you can make sure that you do it or you address it in a future time when you have more time. So that way you're not kind of sitting there idly, if that makes sense. But you want to have a reason to plan. 4 is you want to start off with small, achievable items. So success in small items will build confidence in your ability, so start small. So starting small, what are things now that you're not okay with in your life that you would like to change? Write those things down and devise strategies or plans in order to change those things. But make sure, of course, that your plans are achievable, but also make sure that the things that you're wanting to change are small things to begin with, if you haven't done this before. If you're kind of the person that kind of just, for instance, if you feel like you're kind of just going through the motions and you don't really, haven't really done that, like really analyze yourself and critique yourself in a sense, you want to sit down and really plan it out. Plan out what strategies you're going to go through in order to change that trait. And then that's it for my additional points. So not long, as expected. I haven't lived long. But those are the points that I have for the additional points. Now we're going to go into the Word. So in the Word, we're going to go back to, and this is probably the most fun part, I think. We're going to go back to the story of Nehemiah. Just so you're ready, Anthony, we're going to be reading in Nehemiah 1, and it's going to seem like a lot, but the verses are actually, there's not a lot of verses in these 2 chapters, so we're going to read from 1 to 2. And what we're going to do is the same thing I did last time, which is, I think I have the mic up here. I don't know where the mic is. The mic is over there. We're going to pass it down. Each of us is going to read a verse. What we're going to do this time that we did different from last is we started with the first verse, and then I kind of just broke in and just like kind of interjected. But what we're going to do this time is we're going to read it all throughout, and maybe stop at a few points so we can kind of grasp what's going on. And then we're going to go back and mention the points that I have, rereading it again. So in other words, we're reading it twice. But I think it's valuable in this situation because there's a lot of points. Sorry, I kind of spoiled that. We're going to be here for a little bit longer. But there's a lot of points, and I think it's very important to grasp the points straight from the Bible, not from what I'm saying, because I haven't lived long. So if you don't mind starting, Tracy.
Yeah, I know. These are the memoirs of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. In the late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was at the fortress of Susa.
I want to interject here real quick. I kind of forgot to do this. Just want to do a brief recap before we start reading this on what is going on. So we're going to do this almost like 4th grade ELA, the when, who, what, and where. So when. So this is after the events accounted in Daniel. So if you remember in Daniel, you had Daniel's dream with that statue indicating that a lot of powers are going to come into play before the kingdom of heaven came through Jesus. And right now, we're at that Persian power. So Persia is in power right now. Jerusalem has been destroyed. Remember, Babylon took over Jerusalem, exiled all that people. That's where Daniel was. Daniel was exiled from Jerusalem, or taken out of Jerusalem and sent to Babylon to be a wise man for the king, Nebuchadnezzar. Won't forget that name. I've heard it too many times in class, in upstairs class. But Babylon took over, destroyed the Jerusalem, and now the Jews are returning. And they're finding Jerusalem in disarray. So you have waves of Jews coming back to Jerusalem and witnessing the state of Jerusalem when they left, and it's just in decadence. It's destroyed. It's gone. Well, it's there, but you know what I mean. Now the who. So the story focuses on a Jew of Persia, well, I think it's a Jew. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's a Jew. A Jew of Persia named Nehemiah. And his employment was he was a cupbearer of the Persian king Artaxerxes. What? The story focuses on Nehemiah leading efforts to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. It's the same story we ended up with last time. It's a while ago. I'm not sure why I keep saying that. It's like, yeah. And where does it take place? It takes place in Jerusalem, obviously. So now, kind of armed with that, we'll read the story and we'll stop at certain points to ensure that we get everything that's going on. So go ahead, Sister Mama.
Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem.
They said to me, "Things are not going well for those who return from the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire." Come back around.
When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven.
Then I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of unfailing love and those who love him and obey his commands.
Okay. So just just real quick, what's going on? So you have Nehemiah is getting in touch with his, an older brother or an older friend from the past, and they're reconnecting. And one of the things that he mentions is, Jerusalem is it's destroyed. It's humiliating how bad the walls are and how bad the state of Jerusalem is, and this really distraughts Nehemiah. I don't know. Maybe the thing that we can, I can't equate it to because I don't play or I don't watch sports, but maybe the thing you can equate it to is, your favorite soccer team just completely eating it, and you're like, oh my goodness, what's going on? This is disgraceful. But what's happening is that you have Jerusalem is in a decadent state, and Nehemiah is getting very emotional by this situation. He's like, wow, the city's really destroyed. So he starts praying about it. He starts asking the Lord about it. He starts asking, or he doesn't start asking, but he starts praying to the Lord about it, where he presents his problems to the Lord. So that's where we're at right now. Right now, he's listening to my prayer. It's exactly what he's doing. So go ahead, Jesse.
Listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying night and day for your people Israel. I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned.
We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses.
Please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations.
Yeah, give it to Anthony. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. Anthony's good. Anthony's actually reaching out. The verse, yeah. Yeah.
But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you are exiled to the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I have chosen for you, for my name to be honored.
Right now, Nehemiah is still in the prayer. So he's still talking to the Lord. He's still praying. But right now, you see a single quote. It's because he's recordando, or he's reminding, not reminding the Lord, really reminding himself about the promise that the Lord had made to Moses. And we'll discuss that in a bit. But that's what he's doing right now. He's just reminding him about that promise that the Lord had made. I'm going to pass it down. I know you literally just sat down. Hello. Go ahead. Yeah.
The people you rescue by your great power and strong hand are your servants.
Andrew?
O Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it into his heart to be kind to me. In those days, I was the king's cupbearer.
And then you can pass it to Donnie. And then right now, we got to remember who this guy is. Nehemiah is the cupbearer to the king, King Artaxerxes. So what he's doing right now is he's asking for the Lord, or he's asking the Lord to make the king favorable to him. So in other words, to have the king kind of listen to what he's saying, or for there to be a moment, if that makes sense, for him to actually describe or make his plight about what's going on in Jerusalem. Makes sense, because who else would you go to? You know, you're next to the king, so you go to the king. That's the next person in power that you can go to and discuss your problems with. So, Danny, do you have it? Thanks.
Early the following spring, in the month of Nisan, during the 12th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was serving the king his wine. I had never before appeared sad in his presence.
You can pass it to Benji. Do you mind or no? However you prefer, man.
You got it, Benji.
So the king asked me, "Why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled." Then I was terrified.
Yeah. So the king was like, "Why are you sad?" And he was terrified. So it makes sense. I think we haven't had a situation. I don't think we'll ever be in a situation where you're next to someone in power, to that much power, that in a single command, that's it, you're axed. So I'd be pretty terrified too. But we'll keep reading.
But I replied, "Long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where I and ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire."
Just reiterating he's describing what happened in Jerusalem and what he saw, or what he was witnessed by his brother.
The king asked, "Well, how can I help you?" With a prayer to God of heaven, to the God of heaven.
I replied, "If it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried."
The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked, "How long will you be gone? When will you return?" After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request.
So still the conversation between the king and Nehemiah. What's happening now is the king's asking Nehemiah the details kind of the operation. So how long are you going to be gone? What do you need? You're going to see in a bit that Nehemiah's going to request a few things from the king in order to accomplish his task. So go ahead.
I also said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates? Oh my God.
That's it,
River,
yeah.
Instructing them to let me travel safely through their territories on my way to Judah.
And please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. I will need it to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself." And the king granted these.
Request, because the gracious hands of God was on me.
I think I'll finish up because it's just like 2 more verses after this. So that was the request. Those were the requests that Nehemiah had made to the king. So now, these are the last 2 verses, and it says, "When I came to the governors and the province west of the Euphrates River, I delivered the king's letter to them. The king, I should add, had sent along army officers and horsemen to protect me. But when Sanballat the Hornite," and this is exactly where it's kind of weird. I guess you can call this message a prequel to the last one. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard of my arrival, they were very displeased that someone had come to help the people of Israel. So I arrived in Jerusalem 3 days later. And I think we can call it off there because, let me think about this. No. We want to keep going. I'm going to keep reading, okay? I slipped out during the night, taking only a few others with me. I had not told anyone about the plans God had put in my heart for Jerusalem. We took no pack animals with us, expecting the donkey, except the donkey I was riding. So just kind of to specify what's going on here. So there was a little bit of there wasn't a jump. It kind of sped up a little bit. The story sped up a little bit. So now he was traveling through. I believe he has gotten the materials by now, and he's over at Jerusalem now. So what's happening in Jerusalem, you kind of already heard it. He didn't tell his plans to anyone. So he's in Jerusalem, and what he's going to be doing now is kind of scoping what the situation is. Because remember, he got this word, I call it his brother, but it's just another Jew. But he got, not a Jew, but someone he knew. He got this word, or he got this message from someone that he knew. And what he's doing now is kind of confirming that that's true. Kind of trying to affirm that that's true. At least that's kind of what I got about it. So he's affirming that it's true. So then the next verse reads, after dark I went out, let me read over here. After dark I went out through the valley gate, past the jackal's well, and over to the dung gates to inspect the broken walls and burned gates. That's what he's doing. Then I went to the fountain gates and to the king's pool, but my donkey couldn't get through the rubble. So though it was still dark, I went up to the Kaijon Valley instead, inspecting the wall before I turned back and entered again at the valley gate, still inspecting. The city officials did not know I had been out there or what I was doing, for I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. I had not yet spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or anyone else in the administration. But now I said to them, you know very well what troubles we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins. I kind of said that. I didn't like how I read that. He's saying this to the leaders. So you see the quotations. He's saying this to the leaders. This is him speaking. But now I said to them, and the story's in first person, you know very well that what trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Then I told them about how gracious the hand of God had been on me and about my conversation with the king. So they replied at once, yes, let us rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. And then these are the last two verses. And this is kind of where it leads into the last one. We started reading last time from chapter 3. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of our plans, they scoffed contemptuously. What are you doing? What are you rebelling against the king? Or why are you rebelling against the king? They asked. I replied, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding this wall, but you have no share, legal right, or historical claim in Jerusalem. That leads into what we talked about last time. So now, if Anthony, you don't mind, we'll go back to verse 1, and we're going to stop at a few verses. Actually, what we're going to do, we won't read it again. We're just going to go back to a few verses, and then I'll remind you of what happened during that verse. So, Anthony, do you mind going to verse 4? Okay. Verse 4, it reads, the king asked, well, how can I help you? The king asks, 1:4. Sorry, Anthony, we're starting at chapter 1 again. Thanks, son. So 1:4 reads, when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. So what's the first thing that we need to do? The first thing that we should do in our lives, really, if we want to reduce stress, because remember, we kind of deviated a lot here. The whole point of this was to talk about how you can mitigate stress. The first thing you need to do is acknowledge the problems. You need to acknowledge the problems in your life, very similar to what he's doing now. So he acknowledged the problems, or the root of your efforts, so to speak. So we're going to kind of use this and apply it in very general sense. You have an idea, you have a plan, or you have a goal, something that you want to achieve. The first thing you do always is acknowledge the problem and define the extent of the problem. So what exactly does the problem entail? You don't want to be too broad or too narrow. The same thing applies secularly as well. For instance, maybe you notice something in your neighborhood, or maybe you notice something in the church that you don't quite like and you want to talk to leaders about. Or maybe it's something within yourself, which we had already discussed before. Or maybe it's just a simple idea. You want to write it down and define it properly. I keep kind of jumping around. I'm sorry, Anthony. I'm actually going to read so that way we remember what we're talking about here. So verse 5 says, "Then I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenants of unfailing love and with those who love him and obey his command. Listen to my prayer. Look down and see my praying night and day for your people of Israel. I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned." And right there, I want to go into another point, is you want to make sure that you present your problems to the Lord. Whatever goal, whatever idea, whatever it is that you want to achieve in your life, you want to make sure that you present it to the Lord in prayer. What was the thing that he did in verse 4? This was all supposed to be in verse 4. I misread my points. Yes, my bad. But verse 4 says that he went into prayer, that he asked the Lord, that he wept, that he went into fasting. Thank you, Anthony. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. The same thing we need to do in our life. We need to make sure that we fast, that we pray, that we have a strong relationship with the Lord. Fortunately, I didn't really hark on that, but don't think that you're going to achieve a lot of goals in your life if you don't have balance and you don't have a relationship with the Lord. Because one thing leads to another. We kind of implied that earlier, but it's just the truth. You need to have a relationship with the Lord if you want to succeed in the secular aspects of your life. That's just how it is. You want to present your problems to the Lord. And notice he fasted and prayed. Also, you want to make sure you don't make impulse decisions. What does it say in verse 4 again, Anthony? There's a little word there. It says, how long did he do it for? It says, in fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. So don't make impulse decisions. He deliberated on his involvement for a couple of days, and he asked the Lord if he should get involved. The same thing applies for our lives as well. You don't just make a decision. For instance, when a good example is when this whole crypto craziness was going on, for those that were involved, and you were making your impulse decisions, did it really benefit you at the end? No, it didn't. It didn't benefit me. But it doesn't benefit. So you want to make sure that you don't make your impulse decisions. You make decisions that are informed, but more importantly, you want to make sure that you make decisions that you have consulted with the Lord with. Now, we can go back to where we left off. I believe it was verse 6, Anthony. We'll go to verse 7 now. "We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. Please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you are exiled to the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I have chosen for my name to be honored." So with this, what we want to emphasize is you want to acknowledge your weaknesses, but don't allow them to be a hindrance in your goals or to be a hindrance in your prospects or whatever it might be. And here, the way I want to phrase this is we want to notice that Nehemiah acknowledges that he and all of Jerusalem who are going to be working for the reconstruction of the gate or of the walls are sinners and that they're unworthy. He acknowledges that. He says that. And what a defeatist attitude or someone that has a victim mentality, which we've talked about before as well, would do is stop there. They just say, I can't do it. Kind of like what Moses did, where Moses was like, I can't speak. I don't have that ability. But he didn't stop there. He cited a promise of the Lord on his behalf, not to support that he can do it, but more so to kind of act as an affirmation or a trust to God's promises. He's holding on to God's word. So in point, he cites his weaknesses in order to be humble about it, to be humble about the fact that, yes, I can't do this by myself, but then he cites the Lord's promises, acknowledging that the Lord is great and that the Lord will provide provision for him to accomplish the goal. Now we have verse 11. So sorry, I'm going back and forth now. I'm going reading or not. So, "Oh Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it into his heart to be kind to me." In those days, I was the king's cupbearer. So you want to ensure that you carry out your plans with righteous intent before God. So notice how here he says, delight in honoring you. if you have goals or plans, you want to make sure that your goals or plans aren't aligned solely for your benefit. You want to make sure that they're aligned for the benefit of either the church or the community of the church or your spiritual well-being. You know, if you have a job, or something like that that is taking you away from the Lord, or is, you know, the hours or whatever it is taking away from the Lord, you might want to reconsider that as being something from the Lord. Maybe work that decision around somehow. But definitely carry out your plans with righteous intent before God. Second one with that is you always want to seek the Lord's protective covering in anything you do. And I think we do this instinctually before a test. I think it's the most practical example. Before a test, what do? Lord, allow me to succeed during this test, or whatever it might be. What I personally do is I ask the Lord to give me the ability to remember, because I know under pressure, I'm not going to remember. So I know the equations, I know how they work, but I'm not going to remember. So that's what I try to do before a test. And you also want to ask the Lord to bless you on what you're about to embark. And we're down to the last page, so we're almost done. Now we're going to go into chapter 2. So remember, the first chapter was kind of the conversation between Nehemiah and the Lord, and Nehemiah bringing his worries to the Lord. Now 2 is kind of the conversation with the king. He talks with the king gives him the green light. Then after the green light, he goes down to Jerusalem with the materials he got from permission with the king to do the work that the Lord called him to do. Now verse 2, we'll read that one. It says, "So the king asked me, 'Why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled.' Then I was terrified." And with this, what we want to take away from this is doors will open if God... doors are going to open if God's will align with your plans. So this kind of goes back to the previous point, but of course you want to make sure that your goals align with God's will. Otherwise, they're not going to come to fruition. Don't even think about it. Verses 2 and verses 3. We'll read 3 right now so we can get this part. "But I replied, 'Long live the king! How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins. The gates have been destroyed by fire.'" And this is the one I really want to hark on and I want to kind of get is, when a door opens, don't hesitate because it wasn't the way you intended it. So, for instance, I don't have to give an example. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. If a door opens, sometimes things happen in our lives that aren't the way we exactly planned it. For instance, in Nehemiah's case, I'm pretty sure he didn't, him looking sad, the king is going to say or take notice of that. I'm not particularly sure he was going to see or he did that intentionally or he wanted that to work out that way, because it says in verse 2 that he was terrified. He was terrified about the fact that the king asked him that question. So I'm pretty sure this conversation or this didn't act out the way that he intended it to. I'm sure Nehemiah was kind of thinking about, maybe I should ask the king when I bring his next cup of wine or something like that, But this is how it came up. But Nehemiah immediately took the opportunity and went through the open door, despite his fear. And with that, he was fearful of the king, but he overcame his fear. The same thing goes to us. When we're about to embark on something new, we want to make sure that we overcome that fear. Verses 6 and verses 8. Verse 6. The king with the queen besides him asked, "How long will you be gone? When will you return?" After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. I also said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of Euphrates River, instructing them to let me safely travel through the territories on their way to Judah." And then verse 8. "And please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. I will need it to make the beams of the gates of the temple fortress for the city walls and for the house and a house for myself." And the king granted these. So there's a few things we want to notice here, but the primary thing that we want to get from these three verses that we read is prepare so as to execute your plan decisively when the door opens. So preparation, this goes back to one of the very first points that we opened up with. You want to make sure that you prepare and plan accordingly ahead of time. You want to have contingencies. You kind of want to be like Batman in a sense. You want to make sure that you are ahead of time, that you prepare for things that may happen. But you also want to prepare detailed. For instance, for him, notice how he knew how long the project was going to last, because he gave the king an estimate of how long he was going to be out for. He also described what materials he needed for the construction of the gate or the wall. He also knew what supporting documents he needed. So he needed the permissions to get the materials. He also needed a few blessings on his way, or some escort on his way, to make sure that he didn't get harmed. And he also, it's implied, but he also had designs. It's implied that he already had a drawing or a set design in which to construct the walls. And the reason that's implied is because, I might be wrong here, but the reason I think it's implied is because he's asking for the materials. You don't just ask for materials without having a design first. You usually have a design and know how much you need, and then you ask for the materials, right? But all of this kind of wraps to the point that he planned decisively. He was detailed with his planifications, and when that door opened, he didn't hesitate to go through because he wasn't thoroughly planning, or he hadn't thoroughly planned. Now verse 12. We're almost done. Only 2 more. I slipped out during the night, taking only a few others with me. I had not told anyone about the plans God had put in my heart for Jerusalem. We took no pack animals with us except the donkey I was riding. So right here, and this one I'm going to be a little brief on, is you want to be weary about who you share your plans with. If you start sharing your plans with everybody, something I found personally, and this isn't, something I found personally, and I'll go into what you can actually get from this, is when you share your plans with a lot of people and stuff like that, and then they don't quite come true as fast as you wanted them to, you kind of get discouraged, and then you don't want to do it. Or you kind of just go away, or kind of start breaking away from that plan. So you want to make sure you don't share your plans with other people. Yes, that's in part, but the main reason why is because people are going to discourage you from doing those plans. Bad people, of course. You want to make sure you talk to the right people. You want to get counsel when you're doing your plans, obviously, but don't just give your plans out to everyone. Verse 13, Anthony. Next one. After dark, I went out through the valley gate, past the jackal's well, and over to the dung gate to inspect the broken walls and burned gates. So, what do we want to get from here? You always want to assess situations and adapt accordingly. You want to assess what it is that you're doing, or whatever plan or whatever project or whatever it is that you're embarking. You want to make sure that you assess thoroughly what's going on in that situation actively. So that means using an engineering example, or not even an engineering example, just a management example in general. If you're managing a group of people, you want to make sure you keep tabs on where they are at any point in time on a project. For instance, if you break up, you assign roles, and you're the assigned leader or whatever it is, you want to make sure that you keep tabs on what everybody else is doing to ensure that the project is going to meet an end smoothly, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you're going to have, Melinda or whatever procrastinating on her side of the project, and then you're going to get screwed at the end of the day. So you want to make sure that you are assessing the situation or assessing things consistently to make actions accordingly, to act accordingly. Right here, I want to just give a quick confirmation on what he was saying is you also want to make sure that you check stuff yourself. With this kind of goes in line with what was going on here. Because remember, we kind of said that, I might be wrong here, but we said earlier that a Jewish brother came and told him about this, right? So, and he told the king about this. You want to make sure that you confirm what it is that you want to embark in, it actually has any validity, if that makes sense. A good example is if you suspect something odd is happening around the church, don't go and being like, ooh, and causing all sorts of trouble. You want to confirm your suspicions, and you want to talk with the pastors and do things the correct way. You don't want to start any craziness and any voodoo magic at church. So you want to do it the appropriate way. The same thing goes for life in general. You want to make sure you confirm things before you make assumptions, because assumptions can end up biting you in the butt. And then verse 19 and 20. We'll go 19 and 20. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of our plan, they scoffed contemptuously. What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king, they asked? I replied, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding the wall, but you have no share, legal right, or historical claim in Jerusalem. And this is the second to last. And this one's very simple. Goes back to the last thing we talked about. Be ready for an inevitable long battle against distractions. You're going to be distracted. If you choose to go down, you choose to work on a project, work on something in your life, whatever it might be, you're going to be distracted from that. And it's going to be internal temptations. If it's an addiction that you're going to have to overcome with the help of the Lord, or if it's a project or whatever it might be, it's going to be people trying to sideline your project or whatever it is. There's going to be distractions. Learn to live with it now, because it's an important skill to have. And we'll end it here for the verses. Short or long story short, he set out to lead the construction. And something that's key is that one of the things that he noticed when he went to Jerusalem was that there wasn't anyone leading construction. So he noticed that there was a vacuum in leadership, and he took the responsibility of being the leader for this project, which is something that we should acknowledge and we should take in our lives. And I know I know I was a little worried about including this, but we need to remember what the whole point of this was. The whole point was conquering self-sabotaging behavior, right? How do you conquer that? We've talked about a few tactics, but this last point kind of deviates a little bit, because what it is you want to make sure that you take action when you identify something in your life. And that's kind of crucial, because sometimes we kind of see something in our lives and we're like, okay, it's not a big deal. We kind of leave it as it is, right? We kind of, whatever it might be, we kind of just negate it and move on with your lives. But the same thing applies to any other aspect of your life, with projects or anything. Don't be that one person that just points at the problem, in other words. You want to make sure that you're a do-it person. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the leader. Maybe by the grace of God, someone has already taken charge in the situation, and you want to come in and you want to share the load. You want to be a support. You want to help them out. But if there's a noticeable vacuum there and you don't see someone doing it, then take the stand and take the initiative to cause the change, to be a cause for change. I suppose the last thing I want to end with is change is achieved based on the amount of effort we put in. So whatever it is that you see is worth putting effort in, which it should be anything that is relating to your relationship with the Lord, you want to make sure that you put in adequate effort. So we're done. The only thing I want to kind of end with, and I know we might have gone for a little bit long. Yeah, we did. But we went for a little long, but definitely what I want to end with, and I want to let you know, is that the whole point of this was to discuss how to reduce the stress or stress-producing incidents in your life. And this was a little bit unconventional, because we covered it in more so a secular way, but we used biblical stories for that example. It's not really unconventional to think about it like that, because that's just how the way the word works. So I'll end with that, and I'll pass it on to my dad so he can close for today. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.